quick introduction. Ed Zitron, former enthusiast journalist, currently founder and owner of Easy PR, a PR firm based in Las Vegas now, right?
That's right. Well,
the other thing
I
that
feel like saying based is rather old guard. Who is based anywhere anymore?
I mean, you are the most based PR person for sure.
I am extreme. I know what based means, and I am either based or not based, depending on whether that's bad or good.
This is a nice segue. Not that it matters, because
another successful company.
The main thing that I wanted to talk to you about, besides just catching up in general, is all of these Substack posts that you have been writing the last couple of months or more about like the future of work. So what's really funny to me is when I reached out to you and was like, hey, can we talk about this? I felt like you had said all these really good, truthful things, but it was kind of like pissing in the wind, because so much of the forces of corporate office culture were like, no, you're coming back. It's September. These are our new plans. Yeah. And then literally just in the last couple of days since we set this up, all of the next round of Delta variant and COVID and stuff is like, I'm seeing these little whispers from people that work out of offices going like, well, actually, I don't know about it. And now I feel like maybe this weird opportunity where people are really trying to challenge that structure may actually pay off if we all have to like work from home for another 2 years. But like, I guess my first question to you would be, you work remote, your company works remote. Like, it's obviously very easy for you to like, you know, practice what you preach, but like, where did this like tirade, where did this campaign, like what made you start to want to write about this? Like, because I think you're saying some of the most honest things, but it's also not something I would think would be top of mind for you.
Do I look like the kind of guy with a plan? It's the thing I said to Brad Esposito, but I never really had a plan. When I write my Substack, I open up the CMS and I start writing. And I've been remote since 2012, I believe. And because I started the company on my own, I was like, why do I need an office for myself?
Yeah.
I was like, I don't need, what am I going to do? Like, get a mirror and like talk to myself all the time? No. So I just didn't do it. And then when I started hiring people, like many years later, I was like, why do they need an office? They're not with me. Do I need an office to invite them to? And so eventually I just went, I'm never going to do this. Now, as far as why I wrote about remote work, the truth is I open up my Substack, like I said, and I just start writing. And I've had some fucking awful managerial experience. I was really, my first job, PR just lies to you. Everyone in PR who's writing these books for the most part is just lying. They're writing about what they wish PR was rather than what PR is. And so they made it seem like this glitzy, lovely job, and it was actually a very abusive culture. And frankly, like, every kind of middle management persona you could think of, the CEO that didn't do any real work, the micromanager who just emailed you constantly, who would, like, you'd send an agenda to, and she would send it back to you, taking more effort to fix the problem, saying there's one bullet point out of sync, you need to fix that. So that's what I cut my teeth in. And then I didn't really face a ton of that in my second job. They were pretty good to me. But that first year scarred me permanently. So I've always felt like this. But I know lots of people who do feel this, who have faced this. And I think the first like really quote unquote famous remote work thing I did was back in May. It was this thing around, oh no, maybe it was June. Is this thing about the remote work company culture war. And how there are going to be people who force people back to the office to prove a point, to say like, we need collaboration, we need to collaborate, we need in-person spontaneity. We know what these things are, and if you don't, that's your problem. That's why you don't make the big bucks. Will I be at the office to spontaneously collaborate with? Absolutely not. I have other things to do. I am more important. You are less important, which is why you need the collaboration. That is the logic of all of this, and I personally I'm not like the most efficient person, but I generally loathe inefficiency when it is obnoxious. So when processes are created just to make someone feel better or like they're more important, that is fucking stupid. It is just a thing that I genuinely loathe. And there's a lot of it in my industry, but there's a lot of it across modern office culture. These things where we do them because it feels nice to rather than they do anything. And I think what really touched a nerve was there are so many people out there who have dealt with shitty bosses but more specifically shitty micromanagers and middle managers in general. Again, a thing that in many cases only exists because people want, well, I'll get into that in a second, but middle management is such a consistent problem. And ultimately, it all comes down to a major thing where labor is being directed by people who do not labor and do not understand the labor they are making people do. And I feel like most people, regardless of industry, feel that problem, see that problem. And the people who are getting very pissed off at me, who fucking rule, I love how angry
Is that
they
happening
are.
a lot?
Oh, I get a few comments a day on like one of the old pieces. Man, this is what being in journalism's like, where people are just like, no, management is very important, and they write these whole things that I never really read. I just see a few words. I'm like, nah, no one's threatening to kill me. I don't need to read this. But there is a subset of people who clearly have been managers their entire lives who feel very self-conscious about this because a lot of people get promoted to management because companies don't want to pay them more, so they want to give them power instead of compensation. It's all part of a fucked up system. And this remote work thing has proven that there are a lot of people who like being in the office to look at people and pretend they're the puppet master. And you laugh, but it's true. A lot of these middle managers, they like to be able to go, there you are. I can soft intimidate you now. I can ask you into my office and everyone will see and they'll know how powerful I am. Same thing with bosses. Like, now I can have someone summoned to my office. They'll know it's bad because they'll be in there and then their workmates will talk about them. I can reinforce this fucked up power dynamic. Perhaps people aren't consciously doing this, but they're definitely doing it. Anyway, I'll stop my extremely long point.
No. I mean, I definitely think there's something. It's like, how could you argue with that? That happens a lot. I have been in managerial roles where I have done that, and because there's always like I don't know, a moral center. I don't know what would you call it, but there's some little trigger inside of me sometimes where I feel like I do a thing that I'm like, I know this is bad, but it feels good and I can't stop it. And like, it's not how I lived my life as a manager, but there's plenty of times where I can think like, I remember that feeling of being like, I'm flexing on someone right now. And I think the justification for me a lot of times, and maybe other people who aren't pure sociopaths, is like well, this is how the hierarchies of an office work. And so I have to express this because if I don't,
take it one step longer. Let me take it one step further. I think you're completely correct. Also, I add that it feels good to be powerful. It is a good feeling. It gives you good feeling inside. I also think there are people who see that as part of their compensation. They see management as a way of exacting power. I'm not saying you're that person, but for them, all that they've wanted to do to go up the corporate chain is become a manager or CEO so they don't have to do work, but they can make other people do it. That's it. And that is a huge and extremely common managerial problem. Most likely your flexing is just, that's how you assert dominance. Like that's how I've known you a while. I don't see you as a malicious person. And so I imagine you probably were just like, this is how this works. This is what I do to make this work. And I'm in charge.
Sometimes I was just shitty. Like,
we all have moments.
Feel weird about being like, I fucked up on certain things, but I'm more trying to describe like, there's a thing that I've experienced in the last decade or so as I left the newsrooms more and like moved more to like corporate land is there's that stuff which I kind of all bundle under like when my wife and I talk about it, it's like that's ape shit. It's like we're primates, we do that kind of stuff, not to go full Evo psych, but like that's just kind of how human interaction works in some ways. And not saying it's good, but sometimes you're like part of a
you're not saying it's good. It's just how it works. Yeah.
But then there's the other thing, which I think you're also describing. And I think maybe one of the reasons your pieces are resonating so much is when you work in these environments, you can see certain examples of people for whom that is the only thing they bring to the table is that like performative, dick stroking. And also in my personal experience, at least some of those people that do that, accrete a lot of power, and it seems like they're almost impervious to criticism. And just as a phenomenon, I've been very curious to figure out, like, how does that work? I've tried to stay open to the possibility that maybe it adds some utility. I tried to stay open to the possibility that, like, it adds no utility, but like it's a much more powerful psychological, structural thing than I understand. But for me right now, honestly, I bucket a lot of it into just like, I just don't get it. Like, I don't understand how.
Do you mean middle managers?
Yeah, I mean middle managers in general, or bad middle managers, let's say, right? Like, not people who are just. When I do middle management stuff, I sometimes literally use the term like air traffic controlling, right? It's like my job is to manage, and in theory, if I do my job well, planes won't crash together, and pilots can not worry about those other planes. But it doesn't mean I'm like better than or the boss. It means I'm managing, like, just that pure thing.
That is exactly it. So a poisonous American management thing of like the last few decades, I think, is the equation of management with success. So people are oftentimes made managers as a promotion. Like, you are promoted to manager because for a few reasons. One, it sounds good. People know what a manager is, and it's good. It's powerful, and you get to use power. But also there's another side of just, it's a way of compensating without compensating more money. Yes, managers make more money. They don't make as much as just someone who's really fucking good at something, because that becomes a specialist, which becomes more expensive. Again, don't think people do this consciously, but I think it has become so deeply rooted in culture, in work, that people have to become managers when most people should not. You actually made a really good point there, which is manager is not a position, it is a title.
Yeah, it's a role.
It is a function and a role. The problem is most people see it as a higher position. The problem is that if companies had to start making up higher positions that weren't manager, they'd have to start paying people more for being good at something. It's abstracting labor from compensation. It's a large part of it. Also, people love being managers. People fucking love it. But also, most people do not understand what a manager does other than order people around. They also conflate ordering people around with management, which is not the same fucking thing. Management is generally a function of a organization that is too large for the CEO to manage. That is what a manager is. A good manager is someone who is able to empower the people under them, make them better, and get them what they need from the higher ups. They are a go-between. They are a necessary function in some organizations. In a huge organization, you need managers, because otherwise, how the fuck do you get anything done? Similarly, how do you manage a team of engineers? You need a manager for those engineers, but that person, this is an important point, actually needs to understand the job and have done it recently.
Mm-hmm.
The big problem with a lot of managers, almost all of the managers I've had, is they're not particularly good at their jobs, but they act like they are. So to your point about why the fuck is this person here and how are they untouchable? Usually managers are promoted by being either very pleasant or kissing ass or both. They get there because they're very nice, and people love promoting people who are nice. I also am adding that I do not believe that someone who is a shithead but very good at their job should be promoted. But they equate being diplomatic with being nice, and being nice with being good.
Yeah.
None of these things are the same thing. And thus, people get promoted to manager who probably can't manage, have no management experience, no management training, who just get there because they haven't, in PR, the thing I always say is, people in PR mostly progress in their careers by not being fired rather than being good. And thus, all of these micromanagers just exist because they were mediocre but pleasant. Just good enough to not fire. But they got to be promoted at some point, right? And they got X years of... I guess that's good.
Yeah.
So we'll just promote you. And so you get these managers who pretty much only have management. They only have the ability to order people around. And on top of that, they don't know what good looks like. They only know what they roughly have to do. And they also see taking other people's stuff and claiming it's theirs as the job. A friend of mine was talking about the military and how the military does management and how you are graded as a manager by your direct reports.
Mm-hmm.
It's not about what you did. It's about what they've done. If they fail, you're in trouble. You get fired. You are in trouble when they fuck up. Yeah, they get in trouble too, but if if it is a managerial failure, which a lot of things are, you're in trouble and you're fucking flayed for it.
I think slight tangent,
It's fine.
but I think I wasn't asking permission.
Oh, fuck.
I I one of the things, to bring it back to remote work a little bit, like one of the
Yes,
things
sir.
that I think is driving people nuts in white collar work in general is, first of all, it's like shining this light on how much white collar work is pointless.
Yes.
And so I think there's this like scurry back into the office to hit some old norms,
Yep.
because remote work has like flattened the management executive structure in a way that, even if you can argue and I would argue this in certain scenarios, it's like it is necessary. You can't have a 3,000 person company without some sort of hierarchy. Like, you just have to. But at the same time, it's showing how many of those people like have nothing to do.
Yes.
And then also it's showing that some of the people that are very high value, very productive people, not to get super Calvinist and be like, productivity is the only value you bring to an organization, but within capitalism,
That's the opposite. That's the opposite of Calvinism.
Well, whatever.
No. Calvinism is the belief that work is a moral good. You're on the right path. It's just I literally just wrote about Calvinism and work, and it's true.
Okay, no, explain it to me. How do I have it wrong?
No, so productivity is not actually the metric they raise on. It's the act of work. Yes, in Calvinism, from what I understand, and if I'm wrong, which I happen to be sometimes, it is this idea that work is moral and purpose is work. More than it is the very structure of American management culture, which is I am working, thus I am morally good. And those who do not work are lazy. So if efficiency at times may even be the enemy of Calvinism, just because
it could lead to not working.
It could lead to you not working, which would put you in the hands of the devil.
Okay, I understand.
Calvinism fucking sucks.
I mean, what I was neither.
Oh no, I'm glad you brought it up. I love it.
Yeah, I do understand it more now. The thing that I think is being seen a lot of times, and obviously this abuts like the fundamental questions that I think a lot of people online are discussing. I really have serious doubts about how much this is getting out into the real world, although I would like to get your perspective on that too. But it's like, this is a budding socialism versus capitalism versus like, what the fuck are we doing ism.
Yeah.
And the thing that I think is being seen a lot, and I think there's a reason why tech and engineering culture is leading this, is tech, in theory, in its best, simplest case, is an efficiency maker. And so if you have an engineer who's like, I was only really working 2 hours a day anyway, but now I can just do those 2 hours of work. And now Google, Apple, Facebook, all of the big tech companies that are trying to draw people back into their very expensive multi-billion-dollar campuses are going, well, sure, that's fine, most coddled blue-collar person, but also like we need you to perform more work too. We can't just like have you work those 2 hours a day remote. And so if you're going to work remote, we're going to remove some of your salary and benefits from you because like you shouldn't be paid the same way. And I think there's a lot of people basically going, you paid me the same bullshit salary before. Yeah. Like don't just go on. Like just go, like don't make me pretend to have to do more work. And so to draw back a little bit into like the COVID thing and like the fact that maybe return to office might get knocked out this fall, depending on how things go. Yes. I really do feel like some of the revolutionary spirit that is coming, from white collar workers who refuse to be unionized is in engineers is the fact that like, if this really goes on for another couple of years, I think things are going to be they can't not be changed in a fundamental way. And I think it's fine for the tech companies of the world because they already basically built and exist in a way that remote work works. But I think if you have the PR agencies and the real estate companies and the hedge funds of the world, I'm just listing white collar jobs that I barely know about. But it's like those office cultures, I think, are showing even more that it's like, oh, holy shit, we didn't do anything. Like,
well, I can guarantee you that nothing's going to change with PR firms, because PR firms have known they've done like 30, 50, 70% of their workforce has been fucking useless for a while. PR firms love to hire. PR firms are like the best example of all of this, because what the classic PR firm guy thing to do is to hire like 17 people dirt cheap and constantly churn. Just constantly have to contract and expand based on clients. You don't have a particularly efficient business because you just love having people. PR firms are like the nasty little melting pot of management problems, because PR is in a constant argument with itself about how important it is, which is fairly important, but how important it looks, which is not particularly. Nothing is optically interesting about PR. Anything that is interesting optically about PR is external stuff that comes from marketing. But getting back to the main point, which is, I think many industries are going to realize how inefficient they are, but to actually acknowledge this on old school companies would mean the CEO and executives would actually have to admit they made bad decisions. So they will gladly make several more bad ones to reinforce the bad ones they already did. Meaning going back to the office, meaning not firing inefficient micromanagers. Because if they have to do that, they have to admit something larger is wrong. And much like America, they're never going to, because to do so would be to acknowledge a systemic issue. And systemic issues are quite difficult to fix, but also way more satisfying to fix, but you're never going to do them. I have 4 people, myself included, and I never hired up, despite 4 years people telling me to. And I was always like, why? Why am I hiring up? Also, who am I hiring?
Yeah, I've been part of a few layoffs. I've run a few layoffs, small ones, and it's. I do believe the one good thing about like a layoff situation is that every once in a while you hire somebody and they're bad. And so having everybody like a layoff on a kind of regular cadence at least gives you an opportunity to like cut those people in a still deeply painful but like least embarrassing way for everyone. And to me, that's like the best argument. And I'm not saying it's a great argument, but it's like there's some utility there. But there was something that happened recently with Patreon. I don't know if you saw it. Drove me nuts. I try not to talk shit about people on Twitter anymore because like, what's the point? But but then I'll just do a stream and talk shit about somebody.
Exactly.
But
why not?
The CEO of Patreon, like some new CTO came in, like the new head engineer, and they laid off like, I don't know, 50 people. I don't remember the exact number. And he got up like on stream and basically was like crying literally, which like, whatever, I cry sometimes too. I don't want to make fun of him for that. But it was like, it was this, and trying to take the blame on himself and all of these things. And it's like, what I think really got to me was the notion that it's like, I sincerely doubt that this new CTO that you've hired accurately could assess the abilities of all of these people who have chosen to like throw their lot in with your company.
Yeah.
And so this idea that this is this painful thing, but it's necessary for the company and blah, 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 blah. Like that mixture of like pathos with like, but this is what we have to do because the company's more important. It just drives me wild because it's like, I much more respect like an Exxon of the world being like, our job is to suck every bit of oil out of the planet. And if we don't need these people to do it, like, we don't care. We're going to cut them, gone. But this like softer side of capitalism shit is like driving me nuts because I just don't believe it's true. Like, I just don't believe it's true. The reason you had to lay off a bunch of people is because you hired poorly in the past and now you've replaced this new person and this new person wants to set up a fiefdom of their own. And so you're going to cut all of these people and you're going to start over.
Such a shitty fucking. I hate when companies do that.
And it's just like, it's so.
I understand it with vendors. I don't understand it with staff.
Yeah, I mean, there's, and I do think people have largely on both sides of the aisle. Most workers have like, even if they don't say it, even if they're the ones getting up saying it, I think everybody in their hearts knows that like we're not a family, and like if somebody says to me, this is more than a job, it's a family. Like it's
Bad
straight
sign.
up emotional manipulation. Like it's really, really negative.
It is Calvinism.
I also think that it's very interesting, and the point that you're bringing up is that efficiency should be the job of a corporation or a group of people within capitalism. And there's this moment that's being shown to everyone right now, like, look at this great opportunity for efficiency, especially if you're cutthroat and you're willing to cut a bunch of people.
Yes.
And then like people aren't doing it because it like undercuts the promise they've told all their customers and clients for
beyond
decades.
that. It's beyond that as well.
do
And this is the other thing I wrote. I think it's a modern form of slavery and ownership. Slavery would be without pay. So ownership is really it. I wrote recently that I think companies there are some people that believe they see contract or employment as ownership.
Mm-hmm.
It is not an exchange of money for labor. It is on some part owning that person and owning their life and owning their bits and owning their time. But it's not just their time. It's like their energy and their physical presence. And they like to see them because they like saying to all their dickhead friends, I got people. Look at all the people I have. Look how full my office is. Because I think that there is a societal expectation that a successful company has a big office that you can look at and go, look at all the people. And I also think that a lot of CEOs like having people and looking at them and going, look at all the people I own. It's ownership. That's it. Because it's a possession. It's a possession. They see their workers as a possession. They see them as something that they can take and manipulate, and they like the control. And if someone says, seriously, and no one is asking these fucking CEOs in these interviews what they actually mean. The question to ask is, Jamie Dimon, whatever he's called, from JP Morgan. Yeah, I want someone to fucking ask him when he shits out his mouth about this next time. I want them to ask him, Jamie, how many hours a fucking week do you spend in the office? And then your follow-up question is, with whom do you spend it? Follow-up question, how many of the people that work at Chase have you actually met? Follow-up question, of them, what do you think the average amount of time you spent with them is? Because guess what? After all those questions, it will be blatantly fucking obvious that Jamie speaks to no one in the office other than like 4 people. He and all these charlatans are pushing this thing around office culture and office collaboration, a culture that they contribute nothing to, and office culture itself is only a shared scar tissue. Office culture only exists if it's not this, it's just policy. Because all it is abuse that is tolerated or inefficiencies that are tolerated. It is that one crazy fucking person that you just deal with because we're all in the same fucking boat. It is the one thing you deal with because it's unfair, it sucks, it's bad, but it's how things are. That is culture and that is religion. That's all that this is. Because sure, and you know what? If someone calls out a process and says this sucks, and we don't change it because it's difficult and annoying and boring, fine. I have a few processes like that I've never changed because they would take a lot more effort to fix than I am annoyed by them. Like that is the God's honest truth.
I mean, there's your comparison to religion is for me very real.
Abusive religion.
Yeah,
especially.
I came up in a very abusive church, and one of the things that has always been, I left in my teenage years and then like did like a hard left into every variety of
Satanism.
not church. I mean, I would probably call myself a Satanist, like good old fashioned Church of Satan. I love their
deism. Deism sounds slightly more thoughtful.
I like to say Gnosticism because I, just like Calvinism, I don't quite know what it is, but then nobody else does, and it's
same with deism. I vaguely know what. Anyway, what was your point?
But I mean, there's this human need to assemble.
Yes.
And there's something great that comes out of it. And frankly, like one of the things that's most missing in my life right now is having no purpose time together with people and friends, right? And like some of that's a function of middle age and some of that's a function of COVID and, whatever. And there are even times when I'm like, even though I don't believe in organized religion and barely, I'm agnostic at best, I'm like, a church sounds nice.
Yeah, just a group of people are always going to be there.
Go get, and do some stuff with those people. But when I, first of all, it's a very selfish motivation on my part, right? I'm not starting out. Don't get me wrong. Like I'm not beating myself up.
I don't know if it's selfish.
I'm just diagramming it. I'm saying there's no reason, I'm not going there with the motivation of like, oh, there's all these people that I'm going to go help.
Yeah,
like,
right.
I start with like, what am I going to get out of it? But then to put it on everybody else, it's like I look at so much activity of organized religion and go like, and there's plenty of good churches and good communities that do tons of good work.
I'll disagree.
There are plenty of. They're not the majority, I guess. Would be my opinion.
I can believe that.
But the flip side is, it's like, why isn't it the majority? Why do these things metastasize in such a way? And I do think that it's really funny that we're looking at office culture, which is just another flavor of that sort of human organization now, and people don't love it, but they kind of like, well, my dad worked in a white collar job, and now I'm going to work in a white collar job.
My parents wanted me to be a success, whatever.
Yeah. I don't know why I'm using a hillbilly voice for that, because that's not like, I think it's just talking about what your parents did. But it's like, so I'm dealing with a lot of that, and I think a lot of people are too, where in my career, I'm far less skeptical of like big corporate endeavors than I was in the past, because I've had direct experience seeing working inside of big corporations to do work. And I've met groups of people that were really low ego. It's like, I don't think it's all bad. What I do think is that it's, again, majority bad. And I feel like there's this inflection point where we should be, and I hate sounding like a Silicon Valley kind of like, we're going to reinvent the future. But like, it seems like this is the perfect opportunity that we should all be looking at this and saying, cool, we've learned something. How are we going to address it? Where are we going to go from it? And I feel like the workers are saying that, but I don't feel like anybody in power is, they're only entertaining it because the workers are mad.
So bringing it back to religion, my experience of religion for the most part has been negative. Everyone I've known who has brought up religion more than once a month has been abusive. And the majority of people I know who have any part of their identity attached to religion are extremely abusive. The exception would be, I shit you not, the Dominican monk I know. He's extreme. He's probably the most religious person I know. He gave up all his worldly possessions even. And he's extremely nice and non-judgmental and not pushy with it, because he acknowledges that people have different experiences and you can't go about things. I've known many parents who use religion as a means of control. And the answer is, you need to be a good Christian, so do what I say, usually to justify something shitty. Similarly, terrible managers say, I have the year's experience. You should do what I fucking say, not because it's more efficient to do this, not explaining the process because they shouldn't have to, because they have the power. It's the same kind of power struggle thing. I also think religion, people get into to make them a good person, and they think, frankly, that joining a religion makes them a good person. Because they are a good Christian.
I actually don't think that's the main motivation.
I've seen okay, then perhaps I'm broad strokes. I can't speak to religion with broad strokes like
I think the main reason, I think it's just a natural human need for belonging and a fear of death is probably like the top one. And then subsequently there's a side thing, which is like, also now I can say I'm good because I am following through the strictures of a structure. You know what? You are right. You're right. To be good. But I think most people are. I think life is sentience on a single planet in the Earth is super scary, and I think that people eventually their brains short circuit and they go, I can't wrestle with this anymore. I'm gonna like this thing at least like puts it on the back burner, and I can go back to somewhere else. And then the self-righteousness comes after. Like it comes after a while.
I think, though, you are onto something, which is from that larger place, but why set aside? I think you have more experience with this. My experience... Okay, step back. I think what you were talking about with this idea of bringing meaning to the world and structure to the world where there is no structure is something that really is in it, because a lot of these people have got there through some combination of luck and privilege. And it's these middle managers who are going completely insane, who want to believe deep down that the reason that they got there was hard work, but then when I really think about it, maybe it isn't. In the same way that someone who's a good Christian who goes to church every week, this shows how often I go to church, is they think I'm a good person now, right? This is what it takes to be good. Following this, now not doing anything, but following it, it is this thing of the lies we tell ourselves because the truths are a little bit hard to deal with. I believe there's just a lot of CEOs who don't want to reckon with the fact that they're just like there because they got lucky, and sure, they've done hard work, but their privilege allowed them to take advantage of that luck. And I think that the belief system that a lot of these people have, and a lot of what corporate America has, is that they all got there, and the big structural problem is they want to believe deep down that all of this came from hard work versus luck or usury, when it didn't. And so those inefficiencies, if I have to stop people coming into the office, I don't feel like I got as much out of the deal. And if people start saying, well, I only need to work 2 hours a day, who gives a shit? You want the work, right? No, I as a CEO, I want to have you. You're mine now. I don't pay you this salary so that you can not be mine all the time. It would require people to take this big step back and think, what am I actually paying people for? I can't be paying people all this money just for the work, right? Because there is always this larger thing of like why you hire people and how you hire people and why you have an office. So much shit is done because people did it before that I don't think many people even thought about it. Why do I have an office? Why do I have this? Well, because I have a business. Okay, how many people should work there? I should have a good amount, right? That shows the business is successful, right? And all of these things are done based on a vague belief system that they've hammered out because it helped them make sense of the world. See, I eventually brought it back around. And this belief system is falling apart, as you've said, because it's very obvious it wasn't really built on anything. In fact, maybe this is everyone realize this is the God is dead moment for work. Ooh.
I mean, I think it kind of is. There's
Substack for tomorrow. God is dead moment for work.
This is why you can't talk about this stuff without talking about socialism or any sort of support network, whatever you want to call it. And there's another thing that maybe isn't a huge factor, but now that Eric Davis, a excellent writer, kind of counterculture writer. It's such a diminishment of the work he does. But
Al Davis's kid, right?
I don't think so. I don't. Maybe.
Sorry, I'm just being Al Davis. Al Davis is the owner of the Raiders. It's very funny.
Yeah, great one. Thanks for that. He wrote a piece today. It was just like a blog post he was looking at. He was looking through an issue of The Economist, and he saw this ad for Quantic, the MBA online MBA program, and the advertisement for it was like, these women in spacesuits basically, and it was talking about, do you want to be the CEO of Mars in 2099 and all of this stuff. It was especially galling for me because I actually had I applied to get an EMBA through Quantic, and they denied me because I don't have an undergrad. And I was like I feel fine now, but it really fucked me up.
Those things affect you.
Yeah, I was like, I'm trying to take this corporate life seriously. I'm trying to be humble about the fact that I had a weird path to get to where I'm at now, and I'll play by these rules a little bit more and all this stuff. And then I don't know. I guess in my head, I never really considered it. It was like, I'm gonna pay them money for this degree program, and I hope I get something out of it. And then to have somebody say, we don't want your money was like a really weird experience to me. But nevertheless, my point is what I've kind of started to realize in our conversation is that sure, you can trace the history of corporations to the, Dutch East India Company, blah, 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 blah. But really, I feel like this stuff really is a post-World War II in America sort of phenomenon, which is hey, guess what? There's this type of job you can get now that doesn't mean you're going to have lungs filled with coal.
Yes.
Or be under this toil. You can work in technology, or you can work in planning, or you can work in strategy, and you can wear a white collar, literally white collar job. And in the beginning, from the 40s to the 60s, there probably weren't that many of those jobs, and it really did. It was great to be able to tell your kids go get an undergrad, like go down this path. These companies will take you. It was just tech, like the Valley style tech of that era. But I guess the point I'm trying to make is we have like a Potemkin worker class now, which is like this white collar thing.
Yep.
That is not like, now you want to go into the office and you want to have employees. And I do think some people also want to go into the office because it gives them individually this feeling that's like, I'm safe because I have a good job. I have a good job.
This is a stable thing.
Yeah. And it's like, man, first of all, nothing's stable anymore. And second of all, like, are you happy? Like, and not that your job should always be fulfilling, but a lot of people don't have that privilege. Like, I'm not judging the people that don't have a fulfilling job. It's sometimes out of their control. But like realizing how much of that is, and I'm even interrogating my own brain where, like I enjoy the work I'm doing now, this startup, but it's a startup. It could, crash and burn. And I'm like, okay, well, what's next from there? Do I like try to become a streamer, or do I like try to go down this corporate path that is somewhat open to me? And I keep coming back to a lot of times, like, I'm not stupid for wanting that corporate path because it does have advantages. It has money. It has the pomp and circumstance. It has a lot of those opportunities to like, feel safe again, because it's like, well, I'm in this, executive role, and like nobody in executive role.
I have full-time employment.
Yeah. And it's like, I think I've been luckier and gotten, further than a lot of people have. And so it's very funny to me to be looking at that, because I look at it as like, man, I've been fired more times than I can think of for the dumbest reasons, and sometimes valid reasons, but often mostly for dumb reasons. And it's like, everyone is seeing this, I think, or many people are seeing this at the same time, which is that there is no security. And guess what? The government in this country gives you no security. And so the one thing you can have is at least a reclamation of some of your time. Yep. And they want to take your fucking time too. Like,
exactly.
Yeah. I don't know if that was even cogent, but
no.
It's definitely something that I'm realizing, like, what that appeal is, not for the sociopathic middle managers, but also just like people that want to work those jobs. Like that's feeling of safety is real.
It is a feeling of safety and a feeling of purpose, because going and doing labor, like my uncle who used to work here, my wife's uncle, he's a Mexican guy. I do not look like him. But he also, my family are like a long line of non-laborers. Like we have waiters and waitresses, but most of us have done white collar work. On my wife's side, a lot of them have done manual labor and actually been paid quite handsomely because they've stuck with the jobs for 30 or 40 years. I wonder if they started today, if that loyalty would be paid. I doubt it, because corporations have turned human labor into a subclass. But as you said, there are many more white collar workers now. And it's all part of a big lie around what you get out of the social contract. You were told as a kid, you start so fucking young, and it's so depressing. You're going to go to school. You're going to learn the right things so you can go to college, or even go to high school, then go to college, get a good job, then do the same thing your parents did. That is really the thing. And once you get a good job, you get good benefits, which you are required to live. And in exchange for those good benefits, which the company has to pay money for, they don't have to like cut parts of that. They don't have to do anything special for that. They just pay for it. And also, by the way, corporate America and health insurance companies give preferential plans to companies rather than people. Great stuff. So you do all this, and the social contract is meant to be that you are set once you get a desk job. That was always the promise. It is a huge, colossal, astronomical fucking lie. It has not been the case for 20 years, but especially hasn't been the case the last 5 to 10. And everyone's talking about, I had a conversation a few days ago with someone about Donald Trump. Donald Trump, you remember him? Remember Donald Trump? Hey, you heard this guy?
It's familiar.
You heard this guy? You seen this guy? Donald Trump. He, not a great president, but someone said to me, like, I was so surprised by how he was. And I said, I wasn't. And they're like, why? I'm like, did you not look at America post 9/11? I was like, they were like, well, what? I'm like, the racism began from the beginning of America, but really got pumped up by 9/11, as did the poverty injection into the middle class. Not that it was perfect back in the 80s or 90s, but it was easier to get a house. Health insurance wasn't quite as much. Education wasn't as much. Thus, people have been torn asunder, pulled towards these ultimate morally.
Oh. What a screenshot. We'll see if he comes back. I definitely want to take a screenshot of that because I'm nice. All right, I'm going to kick him off and re-invite him and see where he's at. It's too bad. I liked where he's going. See if he comes back. If not, you know what? We can talk again later. It's really hard for me to even think and talk about a lot of these things without just like, being narcissistic and like thinking about how these things affect me currently. And to go off of what Ed was saying, something that I've really been running into a lot, and it's not just me. I feel like a lot of people is there's just a number of jobs out there that, as you try to go get like the more powerful jobs, the more expensive career jobs, there just aren't as many of them. And the ones that are there are often filled with people who are probably also terrified about not being able to get something better as well. And I've been dealing with that a lot on my own personally, is trying to understand like what do I think this stuff is going to get me? And the immediate answers are very obvious, like status, money, security, but all of those are so much more eroded than at least they seem like they were in the past. And maybe they never were. Maybe everything was always fragile. But I'm really hoping that this isn't just another reorganization where finally the people that kind of run these bigger organizations and companies go, yeah, you're absolutely right. We don't need all of you. And they've removed some of the job opportunities. And then it's just continuing to accrete capital at the top. And like, man, maybe that's where we're going. I don't know. But it's been a tricky thing to try to parse on a personal level, because it's like, I still want to be ambitious and like go for things that I think I could be satisfied with and do a good job at and contribute to. But then also like my, my cranky perspective is just like, what is like, man, we're all pissing in the wind. Like, why are we going so hard for all of this stuff? So I sort of live in the space, I think, of like knowing that these are maybe unresolvable questions for mortal beings, but like at the same time, that's why I want to talk to so many people and try to understand how to integrate the ups and downs of that, the personal and the systemic stuff. I was just talking about
That's
myself,
fine.
which I love to do.
Yes.
I mean, one thing I really liked about streaming it, and people, all my friends that gave me a compliment, they meant it completely and sincerely, and I took it, I accepted it sincerely, but they were like, wow, you're good at monologuing. And it was like, oh yeah, no, it's just, I'm a narcissist, and this is the thoughts that are always happening in my head. And so I just say them. Like, it's not hard to just keep talking, especially if you're like,
I think I'm the same way.
You're worried about.
Oh yeah. Just like talk about things. But to wrap it back to what I was talking about, because I am the hero of it. No, so the point I was trundling towards is that there is a larger social contract that we all think we've signed, where everyone thought the world was fair, thought the world, in exchange for this, we would get that. We would be safe if we went into one of these nice office jobs. Except on some level, that safety may have eventually been seen as inefficient. That giving people these things, or maybe it's more that they realize they could pay people less and they'd still turn up to work. because they still believe this false dream. And so the safety that we think we have in these jobs, and I agree, it's like coming to an office makes you feel like you're in a steady job, makes you think that this is special. You're special.
Yeah, there's food there. There's coffee there. Like it has my basic human needs met every day. This is part
of being a professional. I get this and I give this. The problem is that I think remote work has made us realize that that was not a fair trade. It was a fucking stupid trade. If I could do this at home on the toilet, throwing out my third dump of the day because I ate like 50 pieces of bonchon chicken, talking about someone else here, not me. I should be able to do that if the work is good.
Yeah.
And there are lots of things that I think are carryovers from that trade with the social contract or the professional contract, I guess, where we assume that we were in the office for a reason. And no one really thought about why other than it's nice and it's where we go to work. But we didn't think about it as a function. We thought about it as like their religious place. It was a place that you wouldn't go to church in the park. That's just a church meetup. The church is over there, despite it being much the same thing. It is.
I mean,
Catholicism.
This is just a bit of trivia, but like, have you ever looked up IBM hymnals? Like,
there's songs.
So when IBM started, this is like before they worked with the Nazis.
No. This was during. It was the 30s.
I guess it was.
I know because I lost an IBM friend over this story.
They were working on those contracts. But you can find from that early era, and I don't think it was unique to IBM. I think it was just like a common like company culture of the day. But they straight up have hymnals. That is like when the employees come in the morning, turn to page 49, and like we're all going to sing this song about work or how great IBM is or whatever it is, and like I think things are softer post cultural revolution, postmodernism. We've all gotten more skeptical, so those things don't sell as well internally, but we still kind of do the same functions. Like I'm getting ready to run some stand-up meetings with the group of people that I work with. And I just, it's like, I think I know how to run a stand-up meeting, but I'm not too proud to go Google what's the best stand-up meeting and like just go look and see if anybody's got any great ideas. And there's a couple of them that are like, start the day with like a fun question. And while I'm too, jaded or whatever to tend to do that stuff, I am curious enough to consider that. And I immediately was kind of thinking the same things where it's just like, is this just emotional manipulation? Because is it building any esprit de corps, or are we learning about each other at work? Or really should I just accept that the people I work with are human and are going to have some up days and down days and let them moderate that. And if it becomes a problem, then it becomes a problem. But otherwise, just let them live, let them be. And so I would bucket a lot of the things. I really think that obviously you are interrogating this in your writing, but man, there's just so much of this stuff that I never considered to be part of the ruse that now I'm really skeptical of. That said, to take devil's advocate for just a second, I do think there's a possibility of offices or physical locations where work can be done with colleagues. I still can see a role for that, but to get very Fast Company for a second, I love Fast Company, but I also worked there for a while. So
ass company. It's all about my big juicy bottom. Sorry.
Yeah. I mean they do.
That's great, Ed. Thanks for sharing.
You should pitch that in. You're a PR professional.
I'll send it to David Lidsky.
But when I was the one contribution that I don't know if it actually made any difference. The one contribution I made at Fast Company when I was there was open offices are bad actually, and if anytime some architectural firm comes in with their sick new open office plan, it's we're gonna look at that with the context of open offices are probably bad actually, and not just being it's about collaboration, it's about this. Now subsequently 10 or not even 10 years, 5, 6, 7 years later, there's been a bunch of studies that have come back and been open offices are fucking nightmares. They are just people to distract you all the time. Yeah. And so I could see, ironically, or maybe not ironically, but funnily, the WeWork model applying to a corporate job. Like, hey, there's some offices I can book on my calendar app if I want to go with me or 5 of my teammates or whatever for a week or but just the actual physicality of the office, I think, sure, is useful and it makes some sense. But I also think the reality is just a purely financial and real estate one, having built or been part of building a couple offices out in New York City and having an understanding of how much fucking money gets blown on commercial real estate. I think it's just like an egg on the face calculation that a lot of these CEOs or CFOs or whatever are just looking at it and going like, there's no way I can explain to shareholders or any of our other, people that like we spent $5 billion building a like hula hoop in
a big donut.
Yeah. And like, and now 2 years later, we've realized like, we probably didn't actually have to have it.
Could have just done a C.
And so like, I think that there's a huge part of that as well as just purely like people trying to justify that they blew a lot of money on stuff that didn't matter in the least.
I think, but you're really onto something with the open plan stuff, because the open plan stuff is a great example of something that has the soul of the remote work debate, which is it was a decision made by people who don't do work.
Yeah.
Or don't do the work that this will affect.
Like at our old offices at Gawker, the on Elizabeth Street that had been there for a while.
Those are the ones up the very large staircase.
Yeah. And like all the writers were on one floor on 2 big runs of open seating. And that was purely because like that was how much room we had. And like it would, but the point that I'm making is like, when you walked into there, it was almost always whisper quiet because everybody had headphones on.
Yeah.
And that was the only way to try to do the fucking work. And you really did not try to bother other people when they were grinding out 20 blog posts a day, because like people were only there because, their reasons, like they wanted to get out of their home. They wanted to do whatever. It would have been so much better if we could have had, frankly, a bunch of cubicles. Yep. in a big cubicle farm where at least their eye lines and everything were disrupted as much. And I think that the open office plan was starting to fall apart, and now even before that's been fully processed and worked through office culture, now it's just straight up like, oh, by the way, office is not really that necessary for knowledge workers.
Most work. I mean, it's most work that does not require you to physically do something in front of someone else. And I think that, there's a lot of money invested into it, but a lot of people that have been lionized for being pro-office, Steve Jobs being one of them, even though, and I wrote about this recently, how like Steve Jobs, you can read stories about how people would do stuff just to mitigate Steve, which is the most inefficient thing to do.
Yeah.
Unless that person, and he sounds like a fucking psychopath, sounds like a truly horrible person. Like a truly worthless bastard. It was not worth getting the iPhone for that guy to exist. And he is an example of like the lionized businessman. But these people who, a lot of the decisions, and it really comes down to it, a lot of the decisions that are being made around a lot of office culture or offices in general are being made by the people who don't work in them. The people who can be there if they feel like it, but don't. The people who see the office as an option are the ones making it mandatory. And that is the problem. Full stop, period, whatever. Like that is the issue with a lot of culture, but it's, if you don't have the experience, you shouldn't be making the fucking decisions. It goes into politics, goes into religion, goes into work. And it's really apparent in work because most of these people who are demanding spontaneity or collaboration, when put a gun to their head, they probably couldn't name more than like 2 situations where that's mattered.
Yeah.
Been running my company 8 years. There has not been a need for a spontaneous moment, but guess what? All the spontaneous genius moments have happened via Slack or Zoom, and it's been fine. No one's cared. No one's been sad. No one's been happy. Like it's just right down.
To your knowledge, that you know. But yes, you're probably right in your case, and that so we're we're butting up against time. You've been generous, so I don't want to take too much, but I will.
It was my
I will,
fault that my computer shut down. So
yeah, you're just paying me back some time right now. But like, I do, I don't know, not to be a dick, but like, because it reflects some of my own questioning of this. Like, I'm not like, well, you described a problem and now it's incumbent on you to solve it. Like, I'm not, that's bad thinking. But do you see it? Like, if you had to bet, let me phrase it this way. If you had to bet, do you think that there's going to be a material change to office culture, presuming COVID blows through or stays at the level that it's doing now? Do you think anything actually changes from this? Or do you think this is just a moment where we described a problem and then the forces of, structure come back and overweigh it? So you already answered, yes, you think this will change. How do you think it'll change? Why do you think it'll change?
No further context. No, it'd be so funny.
I thought you were serious.
Long and short of it is, if it does not make a huge shift now, it's going to make many micro shifts over the course of the next 15 years. A lot of the people, so Jamie Dimon, the bloke from Goldman Sachs, Reed Hastings, all these guys are like in their 60s. Next 10 or 15 years, they're going to start getting too old to work. They're no longer going to be the CEOs. The CEOs are going to be younger people. Younger people are going to have remembered this moment and remember the old people being pricks, and they're probably going to react.
Yeah.
And so I think that we're going to probably not see a huge shift, but at the same time, Microsoft and Google and Facebook have all been extremely pro remote work. So the shift's happening. Yeah. Apple had to delay there, and they're kind of like, oh yeah, it's because of the Delta variant. That's what it is. What it is there is a straight up fucking revolt happening at Apple. When it's happening at Apple, probably the most powerful culture that I can think of in a working environment that is not a literal cult. If they have people being like, nah, fuck you, Tim Cook.
Yeah.
No, I'm not doing this.
Well, we'll see. I'm going to put an appointment out for 15 years from now.
Yes.
And see, we'll revisit it. And we'll see how right you are.
We'll follow up. No, but the long and short of it is, if I think that there is no putting the toothpaste back in the bottle now, and companies that refuse to do this are going to find themselves in a much more challenging hiring market. Not impossible to hire, and there are always workers, but it is going to cause a brain drain, and it's going to cause people have more choice now, and people can choose to work remotely, and they probably will. Because it's one thing to be paid, if it's a difference of like, for someone making six figures, if someone's going to make $5,000 more if they work in an office, they might just go like, fuck that, I'm going to work from home. And but the real question will be whether it affects the early market, the early white collar workers. And I think it is going to be hard to attract young people without offering remote work. Because
I feel like the middle has the most bargaining power, but it is also like kind of less at stake just from a salary perspective. I really feel for a lot of, man, we don't have time to go into it, but it's like, I haven't personally had to deal with it a whole lot because I got laid off in the middle of the pandemic by a company that really cared about everyone. But I saw a lot of younger sub 30, Zoomer age young professionals run into remote work for the first time in their life. And that was very interesting to see how many of them were like not as into it as I thought they would be. But then I think now when they're starting to have to come back into the office are freaking out, now I remember what a pain in the ass. It's not just the being in the office. That part is supposed to be warm and fuzzy, but it's the commute and it's the scheduling conflicts and, all of that stuff. But I think you make a really good point too, with the fact that as I get older and become one of those people that will die off after I make a series of horrendous society influencing mistakes, I've become a little more sanguine about the fact that it's like, oh yeah, some change just takes some death and time will fix some of these things. And so, I'm curious, like 15 years from now, I think you're totally right. It's a safe bet. I think you're making too safe a bet, but in the next 1 to 2 years, I'm very curious to see how much actual change there is here.
I think it's going to cause a shift, but it depends how big the shift is.
Yeah. All right. Well, Ed, thank you for getting on my stream.
My pleasure.
And do you have anything to plug? Any stand-up appearances?
Easy.substack.com. I'll also be at the Chuckle Lounge in Las Vegas,
Which is what you call your new house that you live in.
I will be asking some questions of our Congress. I'll be taking a wry look at the news of the world. No, I won't be doing that. I do not leave my house.
All right, man. I'll see you later.
Thanks so much.